His Only Choice. A Choices series-inspired story vignette, written by Leenie Brown and narrated by Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library. Author's note. In October 2023, I had just finished refreshing my Choices series books, and to celebrate that accomplishment, I decided to write Mr. Bennet's proposal to Mrs. Bennet because the fact that Mr. Bennet's father does not approve of his choice of bride is mentioned in His Inconvenient Choice, which is Kitty and the Colonel's story. Fanny Gardner picked at the piece of cake on her plate. Normally, she would have been the first to finish eating her dessert, for she did so love sweet treats, but tonight her mind would not allow her mouth to enjoy such things. If you are not going to eat it, I would not be opposed to rendering you the service of disposing of your cake as soon as I have finished mine. She rolled her eyes at her brother Edward, and attempted to smile. Thomas was supposed to have come to dinner tonight and speak to her father. Before this cake was placed before her, she should have been a betrothed lady. She sighed and looked toward the window. He promised that all would work as it should, she said. He was certain his father would see reason. But now she was not so certain that the handsome heir to Longbourn, whom she loved quite dearly, was correct. "He loves you," Edward replied. "He will find a way to marry you." He patted her hand which lay on the table next to her fork. "I'm not so certain your brother is correct," her father said. "Old Mr. Bennet has never been one to bend his will to anyone unless forced to do so." He motioned to her cake. "Why do you not give that to your brother and go up to your sister? You might do better to have her to distract you than us." She slid her plate towards Edward, who took it but held her gaze when she looked his way. "Remember what Mamma used to say?" Their mother had died 3 years ago, and though her brother was a year younger than Fanny, he was constantly parroting little phrases that their dear Mamma had said. She would look at you and sigh wistfully before saying, "Certainly she cannot be so beautiful for no reason. Good will come of it. Good will come." "You look very much like her," her father added. He often said that, and I do not remember her ever being wrong about something being beautiful or having a purpose. "Thank you." Fanny dabbed at her eyes. She hoped with all her heart that her mamma was correct this time. "Ah, my darling Fanny," her father continued, "the world is a cruel place, and I wish that I could protect you from all of it. Sadly, it seems I cannot. Perhaps I should have shooed young Mr. Bennet away when he came to call. But my, you would look fine sitting in his drawing-room, and to have so many rooms and servants." He shook his head. "Your mother would be quite delighted to know that you inspired so much devotion from one who is so well positioned in the neighbourhood. I am certain you could host at least 24 people at a dinner party in Longbourn's dining room, and if you rolled up the rug in the main reception room, there would certainly be enough room for dancing." He sighed. "However, not all love is meant to meet with success. You do remember that necklace you saw, do you not?" "I do." That was a sorry story about a young man who had fallen in love with a lady far above him. It had cost him his heart and his position in the lady's home. Were it not for the necklace that his lady love had given him, he might have been hunted down by her intended and made to pay in some gruesome fashion. "Go on, see to your sister. I'm sure she's growing bored lying in bed and sniffling for no one to hear." Fanny was just exiting the dining room when there was a loud pounding on the door. Anxious to see who was calling and hopeful that it might be Thomas, she stepped back into the dining room to listen. Mr. Thomas Bennet to see Mr. Gardner. It was him. She clasped her hands to her heart, and he was asking to speak to her father. Oh, it must be the best news ever. It simply must be. "He is here," she whispered to her brother and father. He was here. What was she to do with herself? She should attempt to act as she normally would if she had just finished a meal. "I will be in the drawing-room," she said to her father, before giving her cheeks a little pinch. "Fanny," Thomas caught her by the arm as she left the dining-room, "I must speak to your father." She smiled and nodded eagerly. "Yes, I know. I was just going to the drawing-room to wait for you." "I think you should join us." His smile faltered and her stomach did a flip as her breath caught, causing her to feel rather faint. "Please." The word was spoken so sweetly and with so much longing that she simply could not refuse him. "Of course," she said, and then allowed him to lead her back into the dining room and see that she was seated. "Mr. Bennet," her father said, "I had expected to see you sooner." "If my father had been reasonable, you would have." "Did he refuse you?" Fanny asked. Surely her heart was going to explode from the fast and heavy thumping it was doing. At first, he replied. He pulled a chair close to her and sitting down took her hands in his. I was able to sway him, but his eventual capitulation may make you wish to withdraw your consent and may prevent your father from giving me his blessing. He turned back to her father. I would like to marry your daughter, sir, but you must know that while I will inherit Longbourn on my father's demise, there will be an entail placed on it to keep it from any of the females of my line. As it is, a portion of my father's fortune will be passed on to his cousin's son rather than being left with me and the estate. They are funds that are not fettered by current wills and such. To see to it that you will be in reduced circumstances when you inherit, I would imagine, her father said. Precisely. There may be a need to retrench and forego a servant or two, at least for a time, and I doubt my stable will ever boast more than the 2 horses it now houses. He swallowed. That is not, however, his only stipulation in agreeing to allow me to marry where I will. To keep from being completely written out of his will, I am not to marry for a year. The particulars of what I am relating were written and sent post-haste to his solicitor. If, as he says, I come to my senses in the next year, the strictures are to be removed. He shook his head. I will not come to my senses, nor do I wish to do so if it means living without Fanny by my side. However, I will not falter if the worry of such things as an entailed estate, or fewer servants, are too much to bear. I would never be a willing party to harming her. She heard her father draw a deep breath. I will care for her if she needs it in the future, Edward said, before her father could say a word. You already know, father, that I have a promising position waiting for me with a manufacturer in the north, who will see me in town watching his warehouse in a year's time. You will one day have your own family for whom to care, her father cautioned. Is Fanny suddenly no longer part of my family? I will see to it that she's not tossed into the hedgerows upon my demise. Thomas sounded somewhat annoyed. I would not expect you to, her father cajoled. It is not ideal, but I trust you to do right by her, and I've never heard of you carrying on with the ladies as some young men of your class do, so if Fanny will have you, I shall not stand in your way. He held up a finger. However, I will be writing her articles of marriage myself, and they will be strictly written to her advantage and not yours. You must understand that I must see to her future as best I can. Of course, I would accept nothing less. Fanny listened to the proceedings in the room with furrowed brow. She'd never truly been good at following all the legal ramifications of marriages and estates and all those things. She normally just pretended that she understood so that her father would not lecture about what she did not. To her it sounded like her father was agreeable to the new arrangement, even if it was not what he would have chosen, and so there was nothing to keep her from doing as she wished, and what she wished was to be Mrs. Thomas Bennet. The choice is yours, Fanny. Her father stood and motioned for Edward to leave the room with him. We will await your decision in the drawing-room. As soon as the two had left the room, Fanny turned to Thomas. Yes, I will still marry you. All that was needed to see that nothing was seriously horrible in her future was to have a son. Surely she could do that if her mother had. Do you understand that you may be living in a house with my father, who's not disposed to like you? She nodded and smiled, while her stomach did that rolling thing that it liked to do when she was not completely certain. Do you not wish for me to say yes? I dream of nothing more than to be your husband. You must not think that I'm trying to dissuade you on my account. If I cannot marry you, the estate will be lost to my father's cousin anyway. Since you, my dearest Fanny, are my only choice, my heart shall never love another. Her lower lip quivered as her eyes filled with tears. It was quite overwhelming to be so greatly loved. My heart will always be yours. We will have to wait a year, he reminded her. I would wait 100, and gladly, she replied. Then are we agreed that we will defy my father and create a loving, happy home? I doubt we shall ever agree more firmly on anything. He helped her to her feet. Then, I suppose we should go share our joy with your father and brother. He pulled her into his embrace. But not until we seal our agreement as is proper, my love. And with that he lowered his lips to hers, causing all her worries of the past hour and for the future to fade into the beautiful feeling of being loved and chosen by the gentleman who had captured her heart. Thank you for listening to His Only Choice. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please help other readers find it by liking this video and sharing it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll always know when I upload another video. The 2023 copyright for Tales from Pemberley and other sweet story vignettes in which his only choice can be found is held by Leenie Brown. All rights reserved. The narrator for this story has been Christopher, a cloned voice made available by the voice actor through the Elevenlabs library.